CJSW acknowledges and pays tribute to the traditional territories of the peoples of Treaty 7, which include the Blackfoot Confederacy comprised of the Siksika, the Piikani, and the Kainai First Nations, the Tsuut'ina First Nation, and the Stoney Nakoda, including the Chiniki, Bears Paw, and Goodstoney First Nations. The city of Calgary is also home to the Métis Nation within Alberta, including Nose Hill Métis District 5 and Elbow Métis District 6. CJSW 90.9 FM is located on the University of Calgary campus, which is situated on land northwest of where the Bow River meets the Elbow River, a site traditionally known as Mohkinstsis to the Blackfoot, Witchespaw to the Stoney Nakoda, and Gusitsi to the Tsuut'ina. Welcome to Calgary and the SDGs, a special podcast series made by Calgary Catalyst in collaboration with CJSW. This series explores how Calgary connects to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, known as SDGs for short, through local perspectives and the real-world impact of actions in our city. In each episode, our host Josephine is joined by a distinguished guest from the field, offering insights on the goals shaping our city's future. Now let's dive in. Sustainable Development Goal number 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities.
Today we are discussing Goal 11, which is Sustainable Cities and Communities. This is going to be a very interesting topic, and I'm just like you all, I'm very eager to understand and learn more on this topic. To do so, today we are joined by another very special guest, Celia Lee. She's the Executive Director of Sustainable Calgary. Sustainable Calgary is an organization dedicated to transforming Calgary into a more sustainable and livable city. Thank you so much for joining us today, Celia. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Josephine.
Thank you. So let's dive into the topic. Before we start about the sustainable city and communities, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the work you do. What is it the Sustainable Calgary does? Could you please give us an introduction?
Sure, I'd love to. Yeah, so our work is founded in 40 indicators of sustainability across what we call 7 domains. So we have a report called The State of Our City, and we look at things like our economy, our resource use, governance models, the health of our citizens, how is our education system doing, how connected are our communities, and how's our natural environment doing. So it's this pretty holistic set of indicators. But from there, we ask ourselves, where can we be helpful? What does our city need, and where do we fit in? And we've really found our niche in designing and planning healthy neighborhoods. So we've done a ton of research on that over the years, so that helps explain to us, well, what does a healthy city even look like? And more recently, we've collaborated on strategy and policy with local governments. But a lot of our work has been with communities. So working with communities to say, what do you need? How can we improve your neighborhood? How can we make it more convenient and walkable?
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. It kind of sets us for the conversation going forward. So starting with our most basic question, what do you think a sustainable city should be like? Or how would you explain the concept of a sustainable city to a 7-year-old?
Oh, to a 7-year-old. Well, no, one of the best explanations I saw in a magazine, it was a magazine about mushrooms, and the whole introduction was actually an interview with a 5-year-old, and I've never understood mushrooms better than in that segment. I'll do my best. So we want people in a sustainable city. We want people to remain healthy. We want our economy to keep food on the table and shelter over our heads. We want a governance model that allows us to participate in our communities and get the results we want. We want a natural environment that keeps us healthy and keeps the planet healthy. So I've talked about sort of these 7 domains that we think about. And so those are important in terms of, well, what does a city require to sustain itself? It needs healthy people. It needs a healthy economy. That's part of it. But we also understand that all of these things are really interconnected. So if you want people to care about nature, they need to know about nature. So education is so important to that. Right now, we're having an affordability crisis in Calgary. Well, if people are really focused on being able to make ends meet, do they have the bandwidth to think about ecologically sustainable solutions or to advocate, to ask their government for that? So all of these things really support each other. The last thing I'd say is that we really think about Calgary in the context of a global village. What we do here in Calgary affects people around the world. So one statistic, for example, is that if everyone consumed the way Calgarians do, we would probably need 4 to 6 more planets to sustain that. So let's think about what is equitable. What can Calgary do to be equitable, to support our own city, but also to think about our impact outside of our city?
Okay, thank you for sharing that. I think it kind of gives me an idea that a sustainable city should be clean, lot of breathing spaces, green spaces, and walkable, and everything should be equally accessible, and everyone feels like this is home. Does that kind of rounds up what we are trying to understand about sustainable city from a very simple perspective?
Yeah, I think that covers it. We want a sense of belonging, we want health, and we want to contribute to the health of those inside of our city and outside of our city. And yeah, there are a lot of strategies we can use to do that. And as I said, Sustainable Calgary has really focused on, well, how do we build that city? What does the infrastructure look like?
So with this understanding at our hands, let's dive deeper into the Calgary factor. And as the podcast is named as Calgary and the SDGs, so in your perspective, from Sustainable Calgary's perspective, where do you think Calgary stands in terms of that sustainable city?
Well, our State of the City report suggests that we do need progress when it comes to our resource use. We use too many resources. And on equity. So over the last several decades, we've been one of the most inequitable cities in Canada. When it comes to equity, I think what cities can do is make sure we're building infrastructure equitably across neighborhoods. So what we found over the years is that we know some communities have much more greenery than others. We know communities with more new Canadians typically have less greenery. So, for example, the CBC has produced a map that shows this, where you can put your postal code into this map, and it tells you how hot that neighborhood is, how much greenery is in that neighborhood, and how does that relate to the incomes of the people in that neighborhood and to how many new Canadians are in that neighborhood. So when it comes to equity, we can think of, does every neighborhood have enough greenery? Does every neighborhood have enough access to recreation? Can people afford our transit system? Can they afford our recreation? Those are things that are kind of within a city's wheelhouse to think about when it comes to equity. And actually, I think we're making a lot of progress on that in Calgary. The city of Calgary has developed an equity index. I know Councillor Raj Dhaliwal has become a really big champion for equity when it comes to greenery. We're seeing a lot more investment in the Northeast when it comes to biking and walking infrastructure. So I think we're on the right track now within the last 5 years. When it comes to creating more sustainable cities that use fewer resources, our focus has really been on creating these walkable, human-scale cities with lots of nearby destinations. So what we're trying to do is decrease the energy we use to move around and decrease the energy in our houses. And so about a third of our emissions in Calgary come from transportation and about 2/3 from buildings. Now, there's a really interesting stat out there. A study was looking at 10 cities across the United States, and it said that if we doubled our urban density, so if for every house, now there are 2 houses, just that much, we can reduce travel emissions by 48% and buildings by 35%. just because we're moving less far, we can probably move ourselves with our own feet. We can walk there. And when it comes to housing, we're probably sharing amenities. We're probably sharing heating, cooling. Maybe we're sharing laundry. And so all of those things really add up. So I think, some big opportunities we have in Calgary, actually some things we have to do. We have to have slightly more dense communities. We have to have nearby destinations. That's good not just for our environment. It makes us move better. It makes us healthier. And it's more convenient. And we really need to reduce our car dependency. So in all of our research on health in cities, the presence of vehicles has the biggest negative influence on almost every aspect of our health. It also affects our city budgets in a negative way. It also affects our personal budgets when we're really reliant on the car. So I think some opportunities we have in Calgary are to reduce our car dependency. That probably means investing in transit and make room for more dense communities. I'd love to talk about budgets because I think we've done a great job with policy. I don't think that we're following that up with our budgets. We could get into that anytime you like.
Thank you for highlighting that. Now it kind of gives us a sense of where Calgary is, and it's very interesting to understand the relationship, the impact between each and every factor. The livability, the green space, the pedestrian space, our usage of consumption, the power, everything. So this is very interesting. My next question is on the same line, which you just touched upon. So what are some of the challenges that we face as a city that we could work on to achieve that goal?
Yeah. So sprawl and car dependency go hand in hand, I think. We have a sprawling city. And what does that mean? It means our destinations are further. It means that providing services within that city is more difficult and more expensive. So we have to go further, but it's more expensive to put in a transit system at the same time. A sprawling city means that we're in our cars more often. We're sitting more. Sitting is the new smoking. It's terrible for our health. When we're car dependent, we not only have tailpipe emissions, we're finding that the biggest source of emissions is from our wheels, and we're also making ourselves vulnerable to more collisions. So if we start to flip that, if we say, actually, we want things to be closer to us, we want to be able to walk, bike, and take transit, we want things to be closer together, then we start seeing health benefits. We have cleaner air, we're less exposed to danger, and it's a lot less expensive in terms of construction and maintenance when it comes to the city. For our personal pocketbooks, cars are the most expensive option. And so the idea that as a city we have chosen the car as the winner is something I think we really need to rethink. It's an old figure that says that owning a car costs like $8,000 to $13,000 a year. What if we could have one fewer car? A lot of us have 2 cars. What if we could let go of one less car? And what some of Sustainable Calgary's research has shown is that if we could get rid of one more car, we could afford housing in so many more neighborhoods. There's a really big trade-off there.
And it's also interesting to know that the people often choose to, if they're new people here, if they wanted to move to settle in a place in the city, there is the differences between the rent from the downtown area to the suburbs. So that's one of the major factors that needs to be considered in decision making. Many people choose to live in the suburbs and then travel all the way to downtown for work. So I think all of this kind of influence one another. It's like a chain reaction. Totally.
There's actually a short form for that, drive till you qualify. So it's the idea that the housing you can afford gets it's more affordable the further you get from the center of the city. So we talk about drive till you qualify. But if you could get rid of one car, you might be able to come in a little bit more close to the city. That nature of our city also makes it clear to me how much we need to invest in transit. So we work with communities all the time, and we have great conversations. And what we hear from Calgarians is, sure, it would be great if I could get rid of one car, but I need viable alternatives to driving. And so that's where we just need to create those really great alternatives. If you're in the core, if you're near a good transit line, maybe it's viable to walk and bike, but there's some areas that are really kind of deserts when it comes to transit, and we need to address that.
You're listening to Calgary and the SDGs, a podcast focusing on how Calgary connects to relevant United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. You're currently listening to an episode focused on SDG Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities. To find this and more episodes, go to cjsw.com or the CJSW app.
Yeah, that is rightly said. For the next part, I really wanted to touch upon some of the most interesting projects that Sustainable Calgary have been working on. I was so curious to learn about the work with children and also the pedestrian spaces. Could you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. So as I said, a lot of our work has been focused on how cities can get us moving more. How do we design places where walking, biking, and transit are the most attractive options? And of course, those bring all kinds of other benefits to our health. So we often team up with Calgary communities who want to see changes in their communities. And we often prioritize equity-deserving communities because we know that typically they're less well-served with the infrastructure that would be useful. So with communities and designers, and with bringing all of that health knowledge that we've researched, we consider how neighborhoods could be more walkable and bikeable, more convenient, more social. We work with communities to actually come up with designs and actually prototype those designs or make permanent capital projects by making the right, by partnering with, for example, the city or with funders. And so what walkable means, usually that means one of two things. So it means we have great nearby destinations or we have really great routes to get us there. So we might work with a community that says, well, we don't have enough destinations. We want a coffee shop. So we might prototype a coffee shop. We put out a coffee cart and we test it out. Or we might say, the zoning here, the laws say that you can't have a business here. Let's work together to change the zoning, to change those laws. So you could have a convenience store where you can buy your milk within walking distance, or a coffee shop to hang out with your neighbors, or childcare. And what does it mean by having a better route? It might mean that your route is safer, or it might mean that it's more interesting. There's research out there showing that Calgarians will actually walk further than most other North Americans, but particularly if that route is interesting, if it's attractive to us. Having a good route also might mean that it's just not that hot in the summer. So we really need to be thinking about how to make places that are comfortable to walk and bike in. So great destinations, great pathways to get you there. Now, you talked about us working with kids. So recently we brought this, what we call co-design approach to school kids to reimagine their routes to school, and their work really blew us away. So they're redesigning their roads to encourage walking and biking. But most importantly, they prototyped their ideas within 1 year. And that was really important because we wanted kids to know you can change your local environment. You have a seat at the table. And the work they did, they created 3 precedent-setting prototypes. So they're innovating. And you can learn more about those on our website. One of the projects involved closing a road to cars, which was something we never expected they would come up with. They said, we want to close 3 roads and put in a pond. And we were actually able to prototype that. And students at the University of Calgary actually also prototyped a pond using old pallets. So now we've had a prototype in for just over a year, and there's even potential that this will become a permanent park. We're in those conversations. So that's been just such exciting work. It recently received a National Urban Design Award, and I mention that because I hope that that signals sort of a change in perspective about what Canadian cities, who we're designing cities for, and what activities we're designing for, and what results we're designing for. Because I think that's really important to note that we're always learning as we build cities. So now we have new information that says, listen, the way we've started to design roads and communities, we're seeing some negative effects to our health, to the environment. We just need to move forward. We need to learn from that. We need to shift our approach as we move forward. So I hope that all of this excitement we're seeing around the kids' work is a good indicator of that.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And it's really interesting to see what kids can come up with. Their amount of creativity is always very inspiring. Could you name some of the neighborhoods that were involved in this project?
Yeah, we worked in Martindale, which is sort of a more typically suburban neighborhood, in Meridian, which is more of an industrial neighborhood, and in Connaught, or the Beltline, which is more of a downtown neighborhood. So it was really neat to work with different conditions. And yeah, absolutely what you said about kids, what we've learned about kids is that they're such empathetic designers. They're not as attached to the rules that we're attached to, which might be stupid rules. So kids are really good at kind of showing that to us. And when I think of, for example, the piece of street that they want to turn into a park, the kids were well aware that that neighborhood is low on green space. It's one of the hottest neighborhoods in Calgary with the lowest amount of green space. And they said, we want to give back. This isn't just about our safe walk to school. We want our community to benefit from this. They're amazing.
They're amazing. That's very true. So talking about the challenges and the projects that's been done so far, could you throw some light on what are some of the opportunities that Calgary can take up in terms of achieving this sustainability goal?
I think I'd go back to we really need to limit our sprawl, and we really need to be less car dependent. And we need to be strategic about how we do that. Part of that, as I said, will be, I think, much more investment in transit. So one of the biggest issues in Calgary that we hear from Calgarians is they're sick of traffic. Let's talk about real solutions to traffic then. We know that when we make a road bigger, that when we add lanes, when we expand a highway, we might see faster traffic maybe for 2 years, and then it's worse in 3 years. Why? Because we made space for more cars, and now more cars use this space, and traffic is worse. So we need to talk about real solutions to traffic. How can we get some of those cars off of our streets? And for me, that's investing in transit, probably first and foremost in a sprawling community like Calgary, but also making sure that our neighborhoods have, again, nearby amenities, that they have comfortable pathways to walk on, that we're building cities that are comfortable and exciting for kids, for seniors, for new moms who have to push strollers around, all of those people. So now I do think we have to talk about budgets fairly urgently. We have a lot of talented people in Calgary, people at our city, people in design firms. They know what healthy and sustainable and fiscally responsible design looks like. So now I think we as citizens in Calgary, we need to support them. We need to call for our councillors to provide the budgets that support these great policies. So one thing I've been really excited about over the last year is thinking, well, we announced a climate crisis a few years back. Well, what does a municipal budget look like in a climate crisis? I'm not asking everyone out there to be accountants. I'm asking, what do we prioritize in that budget? Let's deprioritize widening roads, pardon me, because that'll make traffic worse. It'll increase our emissions. It'll make our city less safe. It makes our city less fiscally responsible. So the awesome thing about thinking, well, what does a budget look like in a climate crisis is that a budget that responds to climate is one that optimizes our health, that optimizes convenience, that's better for our personal pocketbooks. It's just a win-win-win. So I'd really like to see that shift in budget. So if folks could do just, a couple of things over the next year, I'd say ask your councillors for a climate-friendly budget. I'd say invest in transit. And I think I'd say keep our streets cool. Add more shade and greenery.
That is cool. I was about to ask you on what can individuals and business do to achieve this goal. So you covered a part of it already. Thank you. So let's get into a little bit deeper into that part. So talking about individuals, like every day, what can we do to meet that goal of sustainable city?
Yeah, so I think the evidence is showing that the most important thing or the most impactful thing we can do is be in touch with our elected officials. So there's a lot we can do as individuals to have more sustainable lifestyles, which also, maybe our neighbors pick up on that. We start to shift the culture. But I want to see a Calgary that creates systems where we don't have to think too much, where it's not all that much effort to lead a more sustainable lifestyle. So I would say, first and foremost, be in touch with your elected officials. Let them know where you stand. My father, for example, is a really big climate action advocate. And right now there's a train being built in his community, and the noise sucks. It's really loud. And so we've talked about how for him, his one climate action is putting up with the inconvenience of construction. So feel free to write to your counselor and say, listen, climate action is important to me. I'm happy to put up with the inconvenience of, for example, a new transit line. And I'm excited about what that'll look like in the future. You don't have to be an expert. Just let them know how you feel. If you can travel by walking, biking, and transit, do so. But otherwise, ask for it. In our work with schools, I know that a lot of parents have been interested in calling for safe routes to schools for their kids. I know some folks are starting walking bike buses to school or walking school buses. Those are some things you can do as an individual. You can also donate, things like that.
And for businesses, what would you suggest for even small, medium businesses?
Yeah. So if you're a business that's kind of on a street, there are really fun things you can do, like experimenting with shade structures or plants or something that activates the sidewalk in front of your business that makes it a great place to walk and bike. Those are some of the fun things. You can put up bike racks or bike fix stations as a way of attracting more bikes. And by the way, we know that businesses typically see more sales when they have walking and biking infrastructure. There's a lot of evidence on that I'd be happy to share. You can donate your employee time to a good cause, and incentivize other modes of travel. So I know some of my colleagues are looking into that. Often when folks travel, they're given sort of mileage for their travel. Well, how can we do the same thing for biking or for transit?
That's an interesting concept to think upon. Thank you so much for highlighting these actionable points. We are down to our last question for this discussion. Great. It's been a very interesting topic so far. And my final question to you will be about, do you have a personal favorite when it comes to sustainable cities around the world? Is there something that you look upon to get inspiration or to get ideas for creating a more sustainable city?
Montreal has been really inspiring for me. I'm a little biased. We've partnered with Montreal as well. I was there recently. I've lost track of how many pedestrianized streets they have. They are full of people. They have options for folks with mobility issues. So you can kind of take I forget what it's called, but it's like a taxi pulled by someone walking. Anyway, they have a really great statistics on how good it's been for business. And I believe the shift in Montreal has really come from a health and wellness perspective. So how can we make quality of life better for Montrealers? That's been the push as far as I understand. So I'm a big fan of their work, and I've learned a lot from them.
That's interesting. I'm going to check that out. Thank you. So that wraps up our conversation for today. Thank you so much, Celia, for joining us on Sustainable Cities and Communities. It has been very insightful, and I appreciate all the details that you have shared here today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
This concludes this episode of Calgary and the SDGs. To listen back to this conversation and find more episodes from the series covering other SDGs, visit cjsw.com or download the CJSW app.